Hello, I'm Mike Festa from AARP Massachusetts. I want to thank you for joining us on today's Teletown Hall. AARP is hosting it with a very special guest, Congressman Richard Neal, who represents the 1st Congressional District in Massachusetts. We're going to be discussing new retirement rules to help you save and the future of Social Security. This is going to be your chance to hear from and ask questions of Congressman Neal and to get the latest information about what is happening in Congress and the future of Social Security. This is an interactive call. So I just want to remind you that if you want to ask the Congressman a question or make a comment, all you need to do is on your dial pad, just press *3, and you're going to be connected with an AARP staff member who's going to take a note of your name and your question and put you in the queue. So for those of you who are already on the call, if you do want to talk to the Congressman, you should press *3 sooner than later, so we'll be sure to get you in. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Congressman Neal. And, frankly, he doesn't need much of an introduction, but I think it's important to note that the Congressman has been representing the western part of Massachusetts for a good number of years. Previously, he was the mayor of Springfield. And most important, he is currently the ranking member of the House Ways and Means Committee, has been the former chair, and depending on how things go in the selection, he may very well resume the chairmanship of the very powerful and important Ways and Means Committee. And that's really all I think I need to say about Congressman Neal. I want to bring you onto this conversation and ask you just to give your opening remarks, and we'll plunge right into this very exciting Teletown Hall. Congressman, take it away.
Well, thanks, Mike, to you and to AARP, and on behalf of all of us for your advocacy, clearly on a professional as well as a personal basis. You've been terrific to work with. And as we focus retirement savings, I think everybody understands the nature of the challenge that is in front of us. But it's been a priority for me during all of these years in Congress, from simply upping the ceiling on individual retirement accounts to many of the major strides that we've made legislatively, which I'll talk about later on, to, I think, the most aggressive defense of anybody in Congress as it relates to the guarantee of Social Security. I have pushed back against former President Bush's plans to privatize. I was the lead advocate in the House to defend Social Security. But I've also used the legislative process, I think, to enhance savings that is focused on giving more people an opportunity in Secure and Secure 2.0 for the purpose of setting aside tax-favored prescribed dollars for the purpose of retirement, which comes a lot faster than people begin to imagine. So there have been proposals, as you know, to actually cut Social Security, and we have been successful not only in pushing back, but challenging the numbers that have been used. But AARP has been really important in pushing back against some of these suggestions that Social Security could be curtailed. So we are not going to be supportive of anything that cuts back on Social Security. We've had 3 major retirement bills that have been signed into law during my time as chairman. We started with the multi-employer pension plan, addressing the crisis that was confronting that system. These are people who had played by the rules their entire lives, and all of a sudden their pension plans were being cut by 55 to 60 to 70%. And I, with the help of President Biden, we were able to intervene. And tonight, more than 2 million people are going to get a better night's sleep, knowing that because they played by the rules, that we honor the commitment that the multi-employer pension plans offer to them. Recall that the challenges that those plans had, it was not based on malfeasance. It was not based on corruption. It was based upon the fact that a concept that had been very successful in the 50s and 60s began to wear thin because of corporate mergers, buyouts, leveraged buyouts, and simply changes in structural plans. So I feel that we did very well on that, and thanks for your help as well. There are 10 million people that are participating now in multi-employer plans across the country. And as I noted before, directly 1.3 million people were at risk. So the Butch-Lewis Act, I count as a real accomplishment. So far, it's worked. And remember that PBGC, the Pension Guaranty Trust, Had we not addressed this multi-employer plan issue, it would have taken down PBGC in just a few short years, which guarantees the rest of retirement plans on the private side across the country. So it's working, and we know that there are a lot of workers out there who are going to begin to address retirement, and I think that we've attempted in the legislative descriptions that I've offered to come to grips with that challenge. The Setting Up Every Community for Retirement Enhancement, which was in 2019, the SECURE Act, helped immeasurably. It requires employers to allow long-term and part-time workers to participate in 401k plans. 4 million workers now have an opportunity to save. But we didn't stop there. We followed this success by passing the SECURE 2.0 Act. It requires 401k type plans. This is a big deal, Mike. It requires those plans to automatically enroll participants in the plans the minute they are eligible. As you know, in the past, employees had the opportunity to opt out or they didn't have to sign up. We automatically enroll them, and then they can take it from there. But we think that's a very, very good indication of people who will begin to adopt the employer contributions to their plan. The big deal,
absolutely,
refundable Savers credit. The Savers credit match was a big deal. We build on that success. Now, I hope by the auto IRA legislation that AARP has supported, this will help people, I think, who are more downscale economically. I think the argument is legitimate that we have to get to people who are at the bottom of the economic scale. We think that there's a way to do that that's tax favored, and my auto IRA legislation is quickly, by the way, becoming the law of the states, even though it has not become the law of the land yet. So, standing strong against any attack on Social Security. You know my story on Social Security and how important it was to my family as I grew up. And we reject any proposal to cut Social Security. I want to make sure that Social Security is there for future generations. And I must tell you that we will have that opportunity because there is legislation in the House that I think continues to grow more and more support. So I've been unequivocal in my support for the bedrock promise of Social Security. On that day certain that you've paid into Social Security and you desire to collect the benefits, we want to make sure that it's there for you. And AARP has been a terrific friend of that concept.
Well, thank you for noting that, Congressman. And, back at you, frankly, you have been that lead voice to protect Social Security, to keep an eye on the concerns that we all have about the long-term financial solvency of the system. And I just want to remind everybody, by the way, on this call, that we are talking with Congressman Richie Neal of the 1st District of Massachusetts, ranking member of the Ways and Means Committee in the House. And for those who are on this call, I want to remind you that we would love, and the Congressman would love to hear from you directly. If you have any questions or comments, all you need to do is press *3 on your telephone keypad, and you will be connected with a live staff member who will take your information, basically a sense of why you're calling, put you in the queue. And so the sooner you let us know that you want to talk to the Congressman, the better it'll be. Congressman, while we're waiting for a few calls to and take some questions, wanted to pick up on a couple of points you made. With regard to saving for retirement, setting aside Social Security specifically, but just saving for retirement in general. That point you made about how critical it is that people get automatically enrolled. We have found at AARP, and I'm sure you're well aware of this, that people literally are 15 times more likely to save for retirement if they're automatically enrolled. Now, they obviously have the right to decide how much money they want to withhold from their paycheck and whether they want to do it at all. But the idea that you start, with that in place makes it much more likely that people will start saving for retirement. And so your efforts in this regard with SECURE and SECURE 2.0 are really underscoring the reality that people face, which is they know that they should save for retirement, but we've got to make it as a system more convenient for them to do so. So I just want to pick up on that point that you had made. No, the other thing I wanted to say before we take some calls is that AARP knows that people work hard to pay into Social Security. So let's face it, it's only fair for you to expect to get the money that you've earned. And what we worry about is that if Washington doesn't take action within the next 10 years to protect and save Social Security as a system, it could result in as much as a 20% cut or an average of $4,000 a year from those Social Security payments. We have been urging Congress to reach a bipartisan solution to protect Social Security for generations to come. Now, this Secure Point 2.0, which you had mentioned, was enacted as part of the spending bill passed by Congress and signed by President Biden late in 2022. It includes 92 different provisions relating to 401ks, individual IRA accounts, and other savings vehicle. And the Congressman touched on a few of them. I just want to note for the audience that there are several key provisions within Secure 2.0 that aim to help Americans opportunities to save for retirement and to draw income from those funds once they retire. Some of these provisions are already in effect, and others will be phased in over the next several years. So there are a number of items that are details, if you will, about the act that maybe we can talk about, Congressman, during these calls. But I also want to be sure that we get to folks who do have their own questions or comments. So with that said, I'm going to ask Ted, who has been monitoring our calls for AARP. Do we have someone in queue that would like to ask a question or make a comment to Congressman Neal?
Sure. I think
Ted?
our first caller is okay. Mary. She's calling from Chicopee. Hey, Mary, how are you?
I'm fine, thank
you. Hi, Mary, you're on.
Thanks.
We're doing great. And what comment or question do you have for the Congressman?
My understanding is, and has been widely publicized, that the government has borrowed funds from Social Security twice, which has never been paid back. And all we hear is the Social Security cuts and increasing age limits and et cetera. So whatever happened to the money? When are they expecting to pay back, instead of constantly threatening us with more cuts with the money that we put into the system? And as Congressman Neal, being on a Ways and Means Committee, when are we expecting to get that money back into the Social Security that was originally taken from? My understanding is borrowing money is that you have to pay back. If you steal money, then you don't pay back. So which one of these two is it?
Actually,
okay, Mary,
Congressman. Yep. Thanks, Mary, for the call. Actually, it's neither. Social Security, as you know, is a pay-as-you-go system. We pay in. Social Security has never missed one check to one eligible person who was paid in the last 80-plus years. So my argument is that those were only calculations that were used for actuarial basis. There is no threat to Social Security on that basis. And to this moment, to this day, again, Congress has never, nor has the administration, missed one payment to one person, and we would always honor that belief. The question for Social Security is obvious. People are living longer. And as people live longer, they're going to derive and draw the benefit longer. But I see no problem. It's been repaired in the past. Social Security, even when I hear these arguments that Social Security is going under, that's nonsense. Social Security, even if we did nothing, in 10 years, it would still pay 80% of the benefits it's supposed to. But we are not going to do nothing. We are going to make sure that Social Security is solvent, always. And if you have to increase payments on the government side to Social Security, we intend to do that. I can assure you that under no circumstances would I ever vote to cut 10 cents from Social Security.
Well, thank you for that, Congressman, and we clearly appreciate it very much from AARP's perspective. Let me also remind folks, as you are listening to Congressman Neal and this conversation, we are doing an AARP Massachusetts teletown hall with Congressman Richie Neal of the 1st Congressional District. We would love, and the Congressman would love, to take any questions or hear any comments you may have. All you need to do is press *3 on your telephone keypad, and you're going to be connected. And we would love to know if you have any question, and allow the congressman to respond. Congressman, and we've got a few folks in queue, but I thought I should just raise this point. We do have a couple of minutes, and one of the things that I'm thinking about is Secure 2.0. It's intended to bolster Americans' opportunity to save for retirement and to draw income from those funds. Why did Congress pass this law, and what else do you see Congress doing to help Americans with their financial resilience and, frankly, to get a secure retirement?
So, beginning with that, the answer, Mike, I would suggest the following, because it's the same advice I would give my children. Take full advantage of the employer match. No matter what it is, take advantage of it. It's up to 4%. There's an additional 1% that comes on top of that. That is like having a 5% pay raise every year. Take full advantage of that. Retirement should be the following. It should be like a three-legged stool. Some personal savings, a retirement plan, and the bedrock guarantee of Social Security. So you might have, for local police, fire, for example, or teachers, they might have what is known as a defined benefit plan. I'm all in favor of that. But for those employers who don't offer defined benefit plans, there is what is known, even from the time that I went to Congress, where it started, what is known as a defined contribution. But the employer match is really favorable because the employee contribution and the employer match, they are tax favored. So you don't have to begin drawing down that benefit till you're 65, 66, 67. And one of the nice things about Secure 2.0, over the next few years, you could actually work until you were 75 before you had to draw down that benefit. So you draw down the benefit in your latter years when your income is lower, as opposed to the middle years of life when you're contributing more, when you would have been paying more into the tax system. So we use the tax code for the purpose of encouraging people to set aside prescribed numbers of dollars every month with an employer match for retirement.
Wow, that's huge. You know, that point about, as we know with 401ks, there is a age at which you have to draw, right? Because this is initially not taxed, but as you draw it, it would be treated as ordinary income. So, you know, there is that moment in time when you do have to pay the tax on that income. But as you say, with Secure 2.0, you've extended that time to age 75. And I believe with 401ks, it's 72 now or 73.
That's right. That's right. And if you stay, I'm not going to. You'd have to actually ask people to have this checked with their own advisor. But if you stay in the same line of employment, you can keep on contributing to the system without drawing down the benefit past 65.
Okay, that's important to know. That's great. Okay, Ted. We've got a member question that I see that's come up on our chat. Should Social Security be used to pay down the national debt? Now, that was sort of what was mentioned in the previous caller by Mary, but could we talk about that, Congressman? That's an important question.
So let me give you a quick history because I'm more than familiar with it. On January 19th, 2001, when Bill Clinton said goodbye after his time as president, the country was staring at an extraordinary surplus. We had balanced the budget for 4 straight years, and the country was looking at up to $10 trillion over 10 to 15 years of surplus. There was a decision that was reached over my objection to cut taxes by $1.3 trillion in 2001. And there was a decision reached in 2003 to cut taxes again by another $1 trillion. That's $2.3 trillion of tax cuts. My argument at the time was and is, upon reflection, that a sizable part of that money should have gone into the Social Security Trust Fund. And that even then, there would have been enough money to provide a tax cut for middle-income people, those earning under $400,000 a year. So instead, the tax cuts, 2 wars, and the calamity that occurred on Wall Street in 2007 and 2008, when we should have used that money from the surplus at the time to reinforce Social Security, reinforce Medicare, and there still would have been enough money without those tax cuts to have provided a middle class break, as I noted, for people making under $400,000 a year.
Yeah, those decisions, and I assume that the more recent one that was done, the tax cut from when President Trump came in, that would have given an equal opportunity, or am I wrong about that?
Sure, no, that's exactly correct. That was $2 trillion of tax cuts over 5 or 6 years, and we're going to be staring at the end of those tax cuts in 2025 because they expire. And my argument here is that the government, we're not trying to take money from people at the upper end as much as we're trying to say that there's a generational obligation and contract that we have with each other. In our youth, we all pull the wagon because in our aged years, we might have to sit in the wagon. The idea, the genius of Social Security from the time that Mr. Roosevelt signed it and Mr. Johnson amended it in 1965 to provide for Medicare, the genius has been that it's a generational obligation that we have. And the reason that your children or your parents are not living in your attic is because of Social Security and Medicare and using the tax system to provide retirement benefits for people. Again, I know it's hard to convince somebody who's 21 years old or 20 years old that someday they're going to retire, but they are. And that means using that tax-favored system that we are attempting to bolster and making your contributions to Social Security weekly, monthly, or however you do it with your withdrawal and your paycheck. It is really, really important to the financial security of seniors, but it's really important to the financial security of America because that way they can take care of themselves.
Absolutely. And, let's not forget the fact that when you do have your Social Security income as part of the, one of the three legs of the stool, that's money in your pocket that you can then spend in the economy. It really does reverberate throughout the economy for those who are, selling products or providing services. I mean, so it really is a way to strengthen the economy as well as the personal financial condition of the individual recipient.
Well, Mike, the other point that I want to make
yes, of course.
The other point that I want to make is that people are not getting rich on Social Security. The average Social Security benefit is around $19,000 a year, average. That means that half the people that draw down Social Security are getting less than $19,000 and half are getting more than $19,000. But that number might be a little bit higher right now, but it's just about the mean, about $19,000. That's the average Social Security benefit. So people are not getting rich on it. And our argument with the legislation that we previously described this morning is to build around it to reinforce the benefits of the tax system, helping people save for retirement.
Exactly. No, that's a very good point because, again, that's separate and distinct from Social Security itself. It's where you are taking some control and giving yourself an opportunity to have another bucket of monies to draw on in your retirement years. Ted, I want to, I guess I should remind folks, people have been very patient on the call listening to the Congressman. We appreciate it. I want to remind you, we're doing AARP Massachusetts, this Teletown Hall with Congressman Richie Neal from the 1st Congressional District. We very much appreciate his time and his expertise. I also want to tell you that if you do want to ask a question or just make a comment, you're always welcome to do that. It's pretty straightforward. You just press *3 on your telephone keypad. You'll be put right into queue, and we'd love to hear from you, and the Congressman would as well. I'm going to go to Ted now because I think we have a very patient woman who's been waiting to ask a question or make a comment. Or a gentleman, actually. It looks like Greg. Ted?
Let's go to Greg. He's out in Clarksburg.
Hello.
Okay. Hi, Greg. Oh. Thanks for your patience, my friend.
Hey, how's it going?
We're doing good. We're really delighted to have the Congressman with us today. Do you have a question or a comment for him?
Well, yeah. I was just curious on the way things are going today. Does he feel that we're going in the right path?
In what regard,
I think that.
Well, and the way that things are going. I mean,
the economy you're speaking of?
The economy and everything, yes.
Okay, Congressman, your thoughts on that?
Sure. I mean, I think the economy is very strong. We have now had 2 straight years of unemployment that is under 4%. That's extraordinary. And when you look at increases in productivity, it's the first time in years, and that's how you really increase quality of life, by increased activity. When you look at income gains, they've outpaced inflation. Inflation on the trajectory is headed downward. There are complicating issues in Ukraine, the Middle East, and other places. But by and large, I think that the American worker is in better shape than they've been for a long time. Now, I know right now some people would disagree with that because of inflation trends. But on the other side of it is that there is no question there have been substantial wage gains. There has been considerably important legislation, the American Rescue Package, the CARES Act, the Infrastructure Bill, the CHIPS Act, the Multi-Employer Pension Bill. All of this, I think, inures to the benefit of the American people. So on the general side, I think one could argue pretty forcefully that the economy is in good shape and that the American worker is doing pretty well. Even the report yesterday on manufacturing, that was a very pleasant surprise. We thought that it was doing okay, but it's doing better than we'd anticipated. So I think even given the international challenges that the country face, that you can argue today that the American economy is pretty strong and the average worker in America is doing okay.
Good points, Congressman. Thank you very much. And Greg, thank you for your call. Let's go, I'd like to go back to Secure 2.0 if we could, Congressman, because there are elements of that law that really are going to make a big difference to people in terms of savings. And some of the things that come to my mind, I'd love to hear your thoughts around this, is, the idea of changing the catch-up provisions, right, to give people a higher catch-up limit as you're getting closer to retirement. And even expanding the retirement plan for part-time workers. Those are 2 very key provisions. I was wondering if you could just explain a little more about how you've thought about that and how you fought to make that happen.
Well, the catch-up provisions, I think, are pretty neat. And the reason for that is that if you are, let's say, 30 years old and you're getting ready to start thinking about children, you're starting to think about cost for school. And then by the time, let's say, you get to your mid-40s when you're looking at that child getting ready for college, it's been a bit of a challenge for you. So you perhaps have not been able to set aside more personal savings, even though you've taken advantage of the employer match. What we did in this law, we said at 50 years old, you can start to catch up on a tax-favored basis for what you couldn't set aside in those previous years. So at 50 years old, you can make generous contributions to your 401k plan, and again, they're tax-favored. So I think that's a big deal. I'm glad you raised that because there are a lot of people. Look, I went through it with 4 kids going to college, and you just can't set aside a lot of money during those years. However, we suggested in this law that at 50 years old, you can really start to catch up with your 401k plan, put additional money aside, and it's all tax favored.
Right, and that's just huge when you think about it, because those numbers are pretty big, right? You can save $23,000 just regular, and then you get another $7,500 on top of that.
You can go up to 50. You can go up to you could go almost up to $30,000, Mike.
Yeah, which, I mean, that, now let's state the obvious, which is sometimes it's hard that you need that income immediately, but the idea that as you're looking closer to retirement, that you can put a higher amount of money in, there's 2 benefits to that, right? You're getting the tax benefit, but also you're increasing your next egg. And, with the market the way it's been, and, hopefully you've got prudent financial advisor, you're in a situation where you're growing the principal in that 401k, so that when you start to draw it, you are able, because the tax benefit that you mentioned, you're going to be having generally lower income in retirement, but at the same time, you're going to be building that with interest and investment, hopefully, a higher amount of money to draw on. So it's definitely a big deal, this catch-up. Yeah.
It's a big deal. And the other part of it is, let's say you decide to work until you're 66 or 67 years old. The drawdown on your plan will be taxed less because you're not in full employment if you decide to retire.
Exactly.
So I mean, that's the whole idea actuarially. And there's another part of this, Mike, that's really important because generationally, you and I and many of the callers are connected. We all learned at the youngest age about the genius of compounded interest.
Right.
And that's part of our thought here, compounded interest. You set the money aside, and as you said, the stock market has had a really good run in the last couple of years. I am generationally, again, I would say that there's no guarantee that goes on forever, but my goodness, if you can have tax-favored savings, that really will augment a lot of the risk that's involved.
Exactly. No question. Hey, we've gotten an online question that I think is very important and something I'm sure you're quite familiar with. You've been fighting on this issue, and that has to do in Massachusetts. We've got teachers, other state workers that are impacted by that windfall elimination provision. Could you explain, first of all, what that is? And again, you've been an incredible leader around this issue. It's a sticky one. It's a challenge because of other states and other, political forces at play. But if you could explain that to those who are on this call that may be teachers or state workers and have concerns around the windfall elimination provision.
Right. And those people who have those concerns, they're correct. There are about 8 states in the country where many public employees did not contribute to Social Security. However, that is not always the rule because they conceivably could have contributed to Social Security before and after they took a government job because they took different employment. And they put in the necessary quarters, even though, as a general rule, up to 1/3, maybe more, of their Social Security benefit would be cut because of those state laws. So we've been close on this a couple of times with the windfall elimination provision to trying to repeal it or to at least allow people to benefit from Social Security who paid into it. And my legislation addresses that issue. There is a challenge with what we call a congressional score. And the congressional score, I think, has been a prohibiting factor in getting this done. I have talked to President Biden about this. The 8 states include Massachusetts, Connecticut, Texas, California, and Ohio, for example. So it's been a place where Democrats and Republicans really would like to cooperate on this. There are some that argue that it might include a tax increase, and there are others that would argue that it would include a benefit cut. My idea is just to get something to people who paid into those quarters. They have earned it. It's legitimate, and we should fix it.
Well, you have fought that good fight for a long time. I'm thinking back to, I think the last time we talked when you were chair and you were working with Ranking Member Brady from Texas, right?
Yes.
You were trying to work out a bipartisan solution, but to the point you made, it's not a zero-sum game, or at least there are implications that are of concern. But let's face it, to the point you made, there are people who have, you wouldn't even get the Social Security question answered unless you actually paid in. So these are folks who are contributing to Social Security. They've had it taken out of their paycheck. They've earned their 40 quarters, and yet they're still penalized, right? They can't access it. So that's the fight. And I just want to note on behalf of AARP how much we truly appreciate your efforts to fight this. And honestly, I mean, I think we're all frustrated. You were probably the first one to say this, that it hasn't been solved. But the idea that you won't give up that fight and that you're pressing the point is frankly very critical. And we appreciate it. And I know the teachers and state employees who are stuck in this really unfortunate, inequitable situation, they at least know that we've got a champion that won't give up.
And I'm not going to quit on this because I think that people have a legitimate grievance about how this has been managed.
Absolutely. Well, Congressman, I want to remind folks on the call, people have been great and patient. We haven't had a lot of questions today, and I'm not sure why, but I will remind folks, because we still have time, you can ask a question of the Congressman or make a comment by just pressing *3 on your telephone keypad, and you'll be put right in at this point. And while we are waiting for maybe one or two more of those comments, Congressman, I want to go back to an item you had referenced earlier about Secure 2.0. You had mentioned that some of the efforts at the federal level have been frustrated by, frankly, the lack of action that Congress has been dealing with on a number of fronts. And what's happened, you mentioned, is that some of the states have stepped up to try to come up with their own people working and being able to save, that whole investment vehicle, auto IRA, and things of that nature. What are your thoughts about the states being the lead in the absence of inaction by the Congress?
Well, just to give you a bit of a seminar-type answer, when I filed the auto IRA legislation years ago, it became the model for what the states are doing now. Many of my Republican colleagues, they like the idea of the auto IRA. They're concerned that it would be treated as a mandate. And my response to that is that mandating savings is not a bad idea, including the fact that Social Security is mandated savings. Now, the other part of it that I think is really important is that the states have taken the model we developed in Washington, and places like Oregon, places like California, they've adopted it. And the auto IRA simply says that it would allow states, small employers, and others to set up a retirement plan for people who are, again, not in what we would call traditional employment, but it also would be for those who are in traditional employment. It would say that you could use tax savings by setting up the mechanism that would allow the employee to put aside, again, dollars every month that would be tax protected. And I think some have called this the precarious employment work, because there are those, as you know, including the gig economy, that don't have retirement plans. And we're saying, and I'm saying with my legislation that has been taken up by the states, that we want to allow them to, again, take advantage of a tax system to set up a retirement plan. And I will tell you that it's my own sense that this would be good for employees, employers, and there are a lot of people out there that would be more than happy to manage these retirement dollars. I think that's a big deal. So the two states that come to mind, and I know in Massachusetts, it's being discussed. And
exactly. I can kind of fill in on that. Right.
Yeah, more states, I hope, continue to adopt it. But I must tell you, I'm staying with it. It gets more critical acclaim every year, and I still want to see Congress enact an auto IRA.
Right. Yeah. Well, we certainly supporting you in that effort. I do want to let the listeners know too that with regard to the state efforts, in Massachusetts, it's been an uphill fight. I have to say, we have gotten what we are looking for is in the state of Massachusetts right now. The Treasurer's Office has a vehicle for savings, and what we've asked for that vehicle to be used, and it's managed by the Treasurer's Office. We've asked that those people that work for nonprofit companies, right now you're eligible if you work for a company that's 2 to 20 or less employees, but we want to expand that to any employee of any size nonprofit, and we also are fighting to have that available for people who are working for-profit companies. The net result is, to the point we had talked about more than once, if people know that they can automatically have a vehicle for savings when their employer is not offering it, we're seeing incredible uptake. I mean, that whole 15 times more likely to save comes to mind. The other thing I would tell you is that, it really does help that other states have taken up your idea. And we are able, in conversation with senators and reps in the Massachusetts State House, to point to those states to say, look at the results. More people are saving. And I guess the last point I want to make, and I'd love to get your reaction to this, is that there was an article, I think it was in today's Globe, or maybe it was CNN, I'm not sure, but I saw one of the news feeds that the number of people that are hitting retirement age without financial security is frightening. And especially folks who are lower income. Look, let's face it, the personal tragedy is out there and awaiting, but what about the impact on other systems that the government is running? I mean, when you run out of money, where do you go? And the government is often the last stop. So the impact to the taxpayers, I would argue, is actually worse if people aren't owning their individual responsibility to save for retirement. What do you think about that? What's your sense of how the state of affairs are?
You just gave us a very sound description of the challenge. It's unbelievable that in America today, half the people that get up and go to work are not in a qualified retirement plan. And I think that as you've described it, there are still 69 million people every day who draw a Social Security benefit. So I don't see anything wrong with mandated savings and using the auto IRA and other tax-protected vehicles to help people set aside dollars earlier in life for what eventually will become retirement, and saving every dime you can. And I know for some people that are listening, they're going to say, well, that's really hard to set aside those dollars. Well, if your employer's offering a 4% match plus the 1% bonus, that, as I noted earlier in our conversation, that could be considered a 5% pay raise every year.
Right, that's their money contributing to your retirement.
Their money.
Yeah,
right. And with the TSP program, which has very low fees, as you know, the other part of the TSP program, you can use it for emergencies. You can use it for college costs, for example. And at a certain age, you can begin to draw down the benefit, and the IRS will take note of it for sure. But not to miss the point, you don't have the same pressure if you've saved all of your life in retirement that you had when you were trying to educate college-age children.
Right. No, that's a very good point. And, I guess all of this conversation revolves around the question of how do you achieve financial security in retirement. It is a challenge. I mean, building that nest egg to start with is a challenge with all the other competing costs that you're dealing with. And we haven't gotten anywhere near some of the issues in Massachusetts, in particular with regard to the affordable housing and, just a myriad of choices or issues that are facing people. But in the end, one of the things that we know to be true, and your efforts to protect the solvency of Social Security in the long run, your efforts to get Secure Point 2 and additional saving vehicles, is all to get the individual in a better place for a future which is free from that kind of anxiety of financial insecurity, for which, sadly, a lot of our folks, I'm thinking now, Congressman, you're quite aware of this, the UMass Gerontology Institute have been doing a lot of research on this subject. And in Massachusetts, they're saying that 6 out of 10 people are financially insecure, which is defined by having less income from all sources than what their basic expenses of living are. That's a very scary proposition. And part of that, of course, is the high cost of living in a state like Massachusetts. So whatever we can do, whatever you can do, and you've been fighting this good fight to give people a chance to save in retirement, is very much appreciated.
I think one of the great challenges that we're going to face is the whole notion of retirement. And I wish that we could sometimes lower our voices and emotions about some other issues that are popular on social media and direct our attention to the real challenges that retirement is going to bring to the American family in years to come. Again, I can't emphasize enough the generational obligations we have to each other, as the Social Security system clearly dictates. It's a big deal.
Absolutely. And you know what? It's been around since the 1930s, and you shudder at the thought that we never made that change from the beginning, because so many people, thankfully, at least have, whether that average is $19,000 a year income, that's $19,000 that wouldn't be around had it not been for the creation of the Social Security system. Congressman, I want to just...
I can also say it's the efficiency of Social Security. It's the efficiency of Medicare. Those checks are coming. I mean, that's the reality of it. So when I hear people say that government's inefficient about this or inefficient about that, we have always made good on every Social Security check that people were entitled to. I don't think we've ever missed one. And that says something about the Social Security system.
Exactly. And your efforts and AARP's support of your efforts to ensure the long-term solvency of Social Security is what this is all about. Congressman, there is one last question that just came across it was text as a question. It has to do with the student loans. Does Secure 2.0 help folks that have student loans? And I heard about that, but I guess I don't know. And I'm wondering, Congressman, if you can enlighten us on that.
Yes. We actually, Mike, added a 401k match for student loan payments. So it would allow employers to help students who have debt to pay down that debt, again, in a tax-favored manner.
Okay. That's great. That's now for those who are out there with student loans, that's an issue. And it's a great solution, at least to the extent that you've got a tax benefit for doing it that way. Well, Congressman, we have covered.
It's a big issue.
Yeah, absolutely. I just reflecting on your service in the Congress, I want to say on a personal note how much I've appreciated working with you. You have been really a leader. Sometimes we just say, well, a politician's a leader on something. Well, for you, if any congressperson, whether they are in Florida, Texas, or Oregon, if somebody said, who's the best champion for Social Security solvency in the country, your name would be the first on the list. And you really have been fighting this good fight for many, many years. And I know at AARP, both federally and in this delegation in Massachusetts, we see you in that role. We appreciate your efforts. It's a long process, but we really thank you for that. Now, I notice that we're getting close to the end of this call. People have been patient, and I don't think we have to hold it too much longer. But I wanted to go back to you first to thank you for participating in this Teletown Hall with your constituents to talk about new retirement rules, to talk about Social Security. And we've had Congressman Neal on this call now for almost an hour. You've been delightful, helpful, and really we appreciate all you've done. So I want to turn it to you for any closing remarks you may have, and then we'll put a wrap to this call.
Thanks, Mike, and I want to thank you personally and professionally for the good efforts that you've made. You've been to my office. You always have in mind the protection and defense of Social Security, and we always have to stick with that position. We can never allow Social Security to become just another benefit, and we can never allow Social Security to become compromised when we suggest, for example, that it just should go to people at the lower end, because if it goes to the lower end, it'll be treated as a poverty program, and it'll lose some of its traditional constituency. Social Security works because we all contribute to the Social Security system with the idea that on a date certain, 65, 66, 67, whatever that date is that we desire, we will derive the full benefit that has been promised. And I think that is the bedrock guarantee, again, that I've noted, of the generational obligation we have in America to each other. I can't emphasize enough that Social Security works because we all, as the members of the American family, help each other. So thanks to you, Mike, and thanks to AARP for your steadfast support.
Well, thank you. Well said. Now, folks for on the call that have been patient and listening to this conversation, I want to thank you for participating in this Teletown Hall with Congressman Richie Neal. I just want to assure you that AARP is fighting to make sure that Americans are financially secure after retirement. And we've been doing this for over 65 years as an organization. It is a hard, long road. But as we've talked about today, when you have people like Congressman Neal and others that are fighting to make sure that Social Security lasts, and it is that generational commitment, we are in better shape because of it. And for the members who have joined on this call, I want to thank you for participating and listening in. And I want to remind you that, if you have questions about what AARP is doing these days, not just on Social Security and retirement, but on any matter that affects your life. We have a lot of action going on. We've got a lot of programs that are free that people have been going to, and we welcome any questions, and we welcome any way that you might yourself want to learn. If you want to know, I'll tell you, it's nice and easy. You just go to aarp.org/MA. So that's our website. You go on aarp.org/MA, and you're going to go into an online version of just about soup to nuts on any issue that affects your life. You can also call us during working hours. The number is 866-448-3621. So on behalf of AARP Massachusetts, and again, in gratitude for Congressman Neal, I want to thank you for listening, and we are ending our call today. So have a safe and healthy rest of the year, and let's welcome spring after the latest snowfall. Take care, and Congressman, thanks again.
Thanks, Mike.
All right.